Austin Simmons is the key for Ole Miss to make a playoff run. Yeah, I know, but for real.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. Today, we're talking about Austin Simmons, the long-touted future quarterback of Ole Miss football. Well, the future is now, and it's time to see his talent on full display in less than a week. Ole Miss is stacking the roster with weapons all around him, and honestly, it would not surprise me if he had an all-SEC type season this season when it's all said and done. But every first-year starter has a checklist he has to go through, and Simmons is no different. We'll break down what he needs to accomplish in year one and what his trajectory could look like going into 2025. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And a special shout out to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is. And don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy provide great perspectives on college football, the SEC, and yes, even Ole Miss. So check it out. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Ready for a stress-free tax season and the most money back guaranteed? Head on over to TurboTax.com and get matched with your expert today. So Austin Simmons is going into his first year as a starter, and I was sitting here looking back at what Ole Miss fans could potentially expect from Austin Simmons, and I thought about Jackson Dart. And Jackson Dart went 8-5 his first year as a starter after he transferred from USC. Team went 8-5. I thought about Matt Corral, who went 5-5 in his first season as a starter in the Lane Kiffin system, not as a starter overall, but just in the Lane Kiffin system. And he was an Outback Bowl champion that year as well. So it made me take pause of what's going on. It's like maybe Austin is going to struggle a little bit. But we've heard pretty consistently over the last year or so about how talented Austin Simmons was and how good of a player he was going to be. We saw him in spot duty completely have great game after great game after great game in relief, a series here, a play here, all of that. Austin Simmons made the most out of it to the point where he was 19-32, 282 yards, had 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Now, that isn't huge numbers. That's not big numbers. That's not eye-popping numbers, but that's better numbers than Matt Corral had. That's better numbers than Eli Manning had. Those great quarterbacks that preceded him, Austin Simmons is kind of ahead of the game on that. And Austin Simmons had basically the drive of the season against the Georgia Bulldogs where he let Ole Miss down for a touchdown and allowed Ole Miss to kind of take over that ball game. So Austin Simmons, at that point, the hype went into overdrive, and it's worthy. You just look the way he throws the football, you can tell that he is going to be a really good player, and he probably had the best arm strength on the team in his first year. So he goes into his first year of starting, and he's going to come into it with hype, as we just mentioned. He's going to come in with expectations. If you look at the FanDuel Heisman rankings right now, he's 33-1 to win the Heisman Trophy as a redshirt sophomore. That's the 15th best odds in the country for Austin Simmons. He has all the hype in the world. Now, he's not Arch Manning. He luckily does not have that Manning name at the end because he'd be the favorite to win the Heisman if he had that. He is not going to have the pressure of a Garrett Nussmeier who's trying to turn around LSU or Jackson Arnold at Auburn. Austin Simmons, while being hyped up, also doesn't have the pressure because Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss have won 10 games, 3 out of the last 4 years. So Austin Simmons has expectations to get Ole Miss and keep Ole Miss at that level, but he doesn't have the pressure that means he has to keep them at that level, if that makes sense. And the first-year starting quarterback, there's some checklists that he is going to have to work through. Just the first start that he goes out against Georgia State, that is going to be a moment for him. That heartbeat is going to be elevated whenever you go on the field in that game. The first SEC game at Kentucky, the first road game, wins over the first non-conference and conference opponent, rivalry games against LSU and against Mississippi State. Those are all major steps that a young quarterback has to go through because the emotional capital going into those games, they're going to be different. You know, Nick Saban and Lane Kiffin and all the coaches like to talk about how every game's the same. They're not. Anybody that's played team sports knows they're not. So the heart rate is going to be elevated for Austin Simmons. And Ole Miss fans can remember when Michael Spurlock was hyped up coming in after Eli. So they're going to be cautious of what's going on. I've seen him. I've seen it with my own eyes. I know what I've seen, and I've watched enough film of quarterback prospects to freaking fill a catalog, essentially. I've probably watched more film than anybody outside the Manning Center that would listen to this podcast. Austin Simmons has arm talent unlike anything we've seen since Chad Kelly. He is a cerebral of a quarterback that Ole Miss has not seen since Eli Manning. You put those two together, you have a 1-1 type quarterback and somebody that can really go off. Now, he needs some things to go well early to get the confidence going. Austin Simmons, that's not generally a problem with quarterbacks, and especially high-level ones. But him being a confident quarterback as it builds in the early part of the season, the Georgia State game, the Arkansas game, the Kentucky game, good teams, but nobody that should really threaten what you're doing before you get to that LSU game. That LSU game, they're the S&P Plus number 10 rated team in the country, one spot behind Ole Miss. That's probably going to be a good game. I would not expect Ole Miss to be favored by more than 5 points in that game going there. So it's going to be important on Austin Simmons to control his emotions through that September and into that rivalry game, because that game will probably be the pinnacle of all of the emotion and the adrenaline and the heart rate going up. And after that, everything can kind of slow down, even the game against Georgia and the game against Mississippi State. All of those first year things, he still has to navigate. He still has to play pretty well, and he still has to do what needs to be done. And it all starts in spring practice, where you're developing a rapport with great wide receivers that we've seen Austin Simmons with Caden Lee over the course of this offseason 2 or 3 times in pictures and photographs at baseball games, softball games, basketball games. They hang out. It is really similar to what Trey Harris was like with Jackson Dart. And that makes me think that Caden Lee has a chance to lead the SEC statistically in 2025. I think their relationship is going to be huge, and I think that Caden Lee is the top alpha dog kind of coming back for Austin Simmons. So those two becoming friends is going to be absolutely huge, and it is going to help Austin's transition as he moves forward over the course of the season. It's a really good situation having an alpha dog wide receiver matched up with a new quarterback. And Ole Miss brought in several tight ends in the transfer portal, several larger flex type tight ends, because Ole Miss likes to split their tight ends out a little bit. Running backs, they've rebuilt that running back room, and offensive line, they're going to be fine. I like Patrick Kutas, and I think Devin Harper is going to end up starting by the end of the season for the Rebels. So it's going to be important during these spring practices, these 15 practices, I guess not including the hot dog eating contest at the end of spring, or the Meet the Rebels Day that I think is on April 12th. Not counting all of that, Austin Simmons needs to build the rapport and the trust of everybody that's around. A.J. Maddox and Pierce Clarkson, they need to start their competition for the backup quarterback. It is going to be imperative that those guys are ready to go as well. But Austin Simmons is the key to this team. If they want to make a playoff run, it starts right now building a rapport with those wide receivers, with the leadership, kind of becoming the face of the team and taking it over. It all starts right now. We've been talking about how Austin Simmons is the future. Well, the future is right now. And Ole Miss is going to start spring practice in less than a week. And what it's going to be for Austin Simmons is just huge. It's just massive. But it's not just going to be huge for Austin Simmons. He's going to need help. No man is an island. And that's why I'm watching De'Zhaun Stribling this spring. People are raving about him pre-spring, and I expect a difference maker over the course of the season. I tell you why next. This message is from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes are waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every single deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. This is Taxes. Get an expert today on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. So it's going to be really interesting because Austin Simmons is a massive key for what's going on this season. We gave you the background of Jackson Dart's first year. We talked about Matt Corral's first year. We're going to dig into that a little bit more in the summer whenever I am done with my surgery and back doing the show. We're going to dig into first-year starters and all of that stuff. Don't anybody worry. You're not going to miss a thing. But with a week until spring practice, I did want to talk about Austin Simmons and what he has to gain in the spring. And one of the reasons that I'm pretty hyped up is De'Zhaun Stribling is the wide receiver out of the Oklahoma State Cowboys from the Washington State Cougars. He's originally from Hawaii. He has 161 catches in his career, 2,153 yards and 17 touchdowns. The man almost had a 1,000-yard receiving season with Alan Bowman as his quarterback. Oklahoma State was remarkably quarterback challenged a year ago. It just didn't matter. The guy just simply made plays as he has his entire career. He has gotten to Ole Miss and he is lighting it up in these pre-spring workouts to the point where everybody's saying, well, this guy is kind of the Trey Harris replacement. This guy is going to come in and make an immediate impact. This is a guy that is going to be the playmaker on the outside that's not going to allow defenses to focus on Caden Lee or the tight end position. This is the guy that has a chance to put the fear of God in those defensive backs. And Austin Simmons, with his arm, all of that arm strength is positioned to take advantage of it. The rapport that develops over spring practice with De'Zhaun Stribling will be imperative for the development of both of those players this season. And with what's going on in the wide receiver room, I think Ole Miss fans should be excited. We talked about Caden Lee, 57 catches, 874 yards, 2 touchdowns a year ago. He is the guy that gets photographed with Austin Simmons at every single sporting event, it seems like. That isn't all that Ole Miss brought in, though. Ole Miss brought in Trey Wallace, Harrison Wallace III, 46 catches, 720 yards, and 4 touchdowns as a transfer from Penn State. He's been brought in potentially for that number 2 wide receiver, at least competing for it. Then you look at Caleb Odom, who is the flex tight end. He was a 5-star that went to Alabama, and then after his first year, he did not dig the Kalen DeBoer experiment. He had 7 catches, 65 yards, but he's a 6'5", 6'6" wide receiver, 235 pounds. He basically can line up on the outside because of his athletic ability. He can line up on the inside because he has a tight end body. He has the flexibility that I've talked about multiple times, that when he's on the field, Ole Miss can seamlessly go between 10, 11, and 12 personnel with what he's doing. And doing that at tempo and not allowing the defense to match up with you gives Ole Miss a little bit of an advantage of what's going on. The actual real tight ends that Ole Miss had a star turn from Daquan Wright a year ago in the Gator Bowl. He's a guy that had a touchdown catch. He made a couple of great catches. Daquan came on the show last year. Thank you for him for doing that. He had 27 catches, 394 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And then, of course, Luke Haas transferred in from Arkansas, 26 catches, 324 yards, 4 touchdowns, tight end out of Oklahoma. These are the rapport. These are the players that Austin Simmons need to develop that rapport with. I have no doubt that with Caden Lee, that is going to be developed in a similar way that Matt Corral and Elijah Moore had that ESP in 2020. I think that the Austin Simmons and Caden Lee thing is naturally going to happen. They seem to be fairly inseparable, and that is just going to bear out on the football field. That's how that goes. But when you look at a De'Zhaun Stribling becoming that second option, that real thing that is going to make the defensive back scared, that's going to make life a little bit easier for Caden Lee. And when you put those on the same side, you can't double team both of them. By formation, you can dictate that you can't double team both of them, and that will make them extremely effective. Now, if you, on the other side of the field, you have a Daquan Wright or a Luke Haas and also a Caleb Odom, you have a situation where you have mismatches on the other side of the field where you can split it up and run a little bit of half field RPOs, essentially, of what's going on with De'Zhaun Stribling and Caden Lee. And then you got the run options to the opposite side of the ball. There's a lot of stuff formationally Ole Miss would have the flexibility to do. And don't forget also, Ole Miss signed one of the best high school recruiting wide receiver classes in the entire country when you add Winston Watkins and Samari Reed and Dylan Alford and Caleb Cunningham. With those 4 right there, that is enough to be frightening for defenses by itself. But when you add what Ole Miss did in the transfer portal as well, we talked with Walker Jones a little bit earlier this week, and he mentioned Moneyball. And Moneyball would actually really fit what Ole Miss did in the wide receiver room as well. He didn't talk about it. None of that was brought up. But let's just remember about the players that hopped into the transfer portal at wide receiver. The only position that was close to having elite players in this transfer portal cycle were the wide receivers. And you had Eric Singleton making like $1.5 million. Auburn just completely went crazy bidding on that. Barry Brown going to LSU. Dane Key went to Nebraska. He just actually followed a wide receiver coach. Zachariah Branch going to Georgia, and Noah Thomas going to Georgia as well. All of those teams had to pay a good bit of money. Ole Miss ended up with a De'Zhaun Stribling who has a chance to be an elite wide receiver, one of the better wide receivers in the entire SEC. He has a chance to do all of that because whenever he was at Oklahoma State, he caught passes from Alan Bowman. Whenever Trey Wallace was at Penn State, he caught passes from Drew Aller. That's the reason Ole Miss was able to get him at a discount. And them playing Moneyball and getting the production that they were hoping for will be a major key for Austin Simmons going into this fall. Man, this spring practice is all about rapport. Remember, before the hot dog eating contest in the middle of April, depth charts, they're scared to death of them. Every coach in college football is scared to death of a depth chart right now because of that spring transfer portal window. Everybody wants to talk about why coaches are doing what they're doing with the spring games as they go on. It's because of depth charts. It's because of that portal window. If that portal window went away, they would do a practice just like they always did because there's no chance of a player leaving after that depth chart comes out. Those depth charts are absolutely huge. Now they're going to spin it. They're going to do whatever they can to sound like they're in an advantageous position of OTAs and all of that. It's just because they have no faith that the spring transfer window is going to go away. So why not go all in on it? You don't want to leave any wiggle room. So they say, okay, well, we'll be fine the way it is. But if that spring transfer portal window goes away, you'll see the reemergence of some semblance of a spring game. You will see a reemergence of open scrimmages in the spring. You'll see a reemergence of depth charts pertaining in spring football because there's no way that they can leave until after the season. And you'll know exactly what you have. One of the problems that I think Ole Miss had a year ago was not really understanding what they had because they worked so hard to avoid a depth chart in the first place, to where in the middle of August, they were still trying to figure out offensive line, and Ole Miss ended up struggling running the football because they couldn't lock into what they were doing. I think that spring transfer portal window needs to go away. And the sooner it goes away, the better. But that is the reason that I think, Austin Simmons is the key, and also those wide receivers and skill possession receivers around him are going to make sure that he is as good as he can be. I'm really excited about the 2025 season. It's going to be a whole lot of fun to see exactly how that goes. So we'll see. Ole Miss. So coming up, South Carolina and Arkansas battle it out to see who faces Ole Miss tomorrow. Ole Miss needs an Arkansas win. Ole Miss fans should all hope for an Arkansas win. But Cal says he just doesn't care. And that's got Ole Miss fans nervous because details on the bracket breakdown show on Amazon. We'll tell you about that in just a little bit, so stay tuned. Are you looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. With over 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every single week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab-and-go snacks to help keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. I recently tried their Protein Plus meals, and they were packed with flavor and kept me full throughout the day. Got my brother-in-law on the Factor meals as well. He loves it. The convenience is unbeatable. There's no prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/lockedon50 off and use code LockedOnCollege50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnCollege50 off at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. So today, South Carolina takes on Arkansas, and it's a game that Ole Miss fans probably need Arkansas to win, because if South Carolina wins, all of a sudden there's a roster bomb or schedule bomb that could be awaiting in a game that Ole Miss might not be overly fired up to play against a South Carolina team that gave Ole Miss fits just a few weeks ago. Ole Miss needs Arkansas to really show up. And John Calipari was real honest, and this is the same way he was at Kentucky. He flat out said he doesn't care about the SEC tournament. They're going to play games. They're going to do what they have to do, but they're not going to lose sleep over losing a game in the SEC tournament. And yes, you're going to see all the hot takes out there from the ESPN anchors about how this is atrocious and how the SEC tournament could be so great and all of that. Yes, the right holders who paid billions of dollars for the event wants the event to be as good as possible and get as many eyeballs as they can get. Yes, I understand that entirely. But in the reality of this, the SEC is so good, the basketball tournament that matters is a week from now. That is where the rubber is going to meet the road. The SEC needs a national champion. It doesn't matter if it's Florida, Auburn, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. It doesn't matter. The SEC needs a national champion, especially to justify the dominant run that they went on. You've seen the projections from Joe Lunardi where 12 or 13 teams are in a position to make the tournament, which would be a record from any conference out there. Ole Miss needs, the SEC needs a national championship. And to do that, it is not about running legs ragged in the SEC tournament. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. And in a lot the same way that Lane Kiffin was talking about how coaches are not wanting to make the SEC championship game because of that extra wear and tear, you're seeing the same thing in the SEC basketball tournament now, that Ole Miss is and the SEC is in a position to be really good. So we'll see what happens. Ole Miss fans need to root for Arkansas to win the game today. And that way it's just a free shot. It's a free game. And if Ole Miss loses that game to Arkansas, which there's only 7 players on Arkansas's roster, they're playing really well. and they're extremely talented, but it's not a game that should be in any insurmountable. And Chris Beard and Ole Miss are very much a, hey, win every game that's in front of you type player. So Ole Miss is still trying for that Goldilocks zone, 6 or 7 seed in the NCAA tournament, maybe even slipping down, but they kind of want to avoid that 5 line. And I do personally, because I know that if Ole Miss gets the 5 line, they're going to be scheduled with McNeese State. I get that. And I don't think Ole Miss wants any part of McNeese State, not just because they're going to lose or anything like that. I just think that playing a Will Wade team, they're going to be very good and they're going to be very up for it. And they're probably going to beat whichever 5 seed they get matched up with, because I do think they're going to be a 12. So we'll see exactly how it goes for Ole Miss, and we'll see exactly if the Rebels move on. Hey, cool story. I've been kind of teasing it over the last couple of weeks, but Locked On and Amazon have tapped to produce an in-depth coverage of the men's and women's NCAA tournament for the Fire TV channels app on the Amazon Fire TV. All you have to do is say, Alexa, play Bracket Breakdown, and they will play the latest episode of that. Says Tegna Inc., that is the parent company of Locked On, announced today that they're teaming up with Amazon Fire TV to bring college basketball fans a new approach to men's and women's NCAA tournament coverage. This March, basketball fans will be able to stream studio and virtual shows that combine the experience of former players and tournament experience with local coverage. Locked On is known for, all from Amazon Fire TV channels for free. Amazon Fire TV channels Bracket Breakdown will include a collection of 34 original studio and virtual shows starting with Selection Sunday on March 16th. That's Sunday. And going all the way through the national championship game on April 6th. Production for the studio shows is going to take place in Locked On Studios in Dallas at the Tegna station, WFAA. All shows will be available on demand on the Amazon Fire TV channels app. Amazon Fire TV service users can play these shows by simply asking Alexa to play it. Should be really cool. You're going to see potentially yours truly on that. There's experts that there to talk about women's basketball that are pretty knowledgeable what's going on. We're going to have a good time, and we're going to have that. I think Gordon Hayward is going to be part of the coverage unit that is in studio. And of course, the Locked On College Basketball and Locked On Women's College Basketball host will be around as well. Should be fun. I'm going to be blowing out the channel with all kind of social hits of what they're talking about. They're just basically going to spit a ton of stuff out. Keep an eye out on the shorts menu. So download or subscribe, I should say, to the Locked On Ole Miss YouTube feed for notifications of when that is going to happen. And plus, I think 12 hours after the show airs, they're going to put the show on my channel, or at least the part of the show that I'm on, or them talking about Ole Miss. So we'll see exactly how that goes. I'm pretty fired up about what can happen there. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast out there. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. March is here, so be the most informed college basketball fan throughout the madness. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hotty toddy, everyone. And remember, analytics is just the old English word meaning bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.